right. Let's start with a prayer with praise to Manjushri. Obeisance to my Guru and protector Manjushri holds as his heart a scriptural text embodied for his things or things as they are, whose understanding shines forth to the sun unclouded by defilements or traces of ignorance, who teaches in 60 ways with a patient love of Father for his only Son. All creatures caught in the prison of samsara, confused in the darkness of their ignorance, overwhelmed by their suffering. Use whose drunken thunder proclamation of the Dhamma arises us from the stupor of our delusions and frees us from the iron chains of our karma, whose powerful sword of wisdom hews our suffering wherever its sprouts appear, clearing away the darkness of all ignorance. And Trishul Manjushri's princely body is adorned with the 112 marks of a Buddha, who has completed the 10 stages, achieving the highest perfection of a Bodhisattva, who has been pure from the beginning. O Manjushri, O loved one, with the brilliance of your wisdom, illuminate the darkness enclosing my mind, enlighten my intelligence and wisdom, so I might gain insight into the Buddha's words and the texts that explain them. Sashi Paki Joshi Meto Tam Rikshi Nidegen Padi Sangye Shindo Mikte Owa Hirdoku Namda Shinla Chupa Shui Danguru Ramandala Kamiya Tayami Sanji Chodam Toji Chonam La Chanchu Bardu Dami Kyabsun Chi Dagi Chushi Jibe Tonagi Drolam Penche Sanjin Druparashu Sanji Chodam Toji Chonam La Chanchu Bardu Dami Kyabsun Chi Dagi Chushi Jibe Tonagi Drolam Penche Sanjin Druparashu Sanji Chedan Soji Chonung La Chancho Pardu Dani Kyabsunchi Dagi Chushegi Bet Sonum Ji Drolam Penche Sanji Druparashu Kangi Tuzinyi Zone Tawa Tamje Pambichir Tambichun Denze Kodam Tela Chancelo. All right, so coffee and tea offering.
Not just
together.
Tea.
Coffee.
Coffee.
Orange
Just
juice, Dash Coke, whatever you have. Give it to me. All right. Lama Sangye Lama Chu Shi Lama Gendun Kungi Chepo Lama Te Lama Namla Chumbara
Good morning, everyone. Coffee turn look at
Coffee tune.
Shant Deva coffee shenyu yeki sant.
Especially your salamare. Tadi coffee arigi linchen jundo. Beja di Loshibya. Geshe was wondering how long ago did the world become a coffee drinker world? And I think that the origin of coffee is probably South America, right? So probably for the past 300, 400 years, I'd say. Yeah. Along with tomatoes and potatoes, I think. Anyway, yeah, coffee is good with everything, apart from mangoes.
가서
Dila.
가서
Dila de zamanı kasa kana dende çik cünşasa. Dila çik yaman se gegap çire longam kyas.
샨드데와 로
Şimdi badi number chu pela tardurwa. Nima kab di kapsula şeşev şeşuber. Durab dumba gebasla. So I think that Shantideva was like a 7th or 8th century master, right? 8th century master. Yeah. So it was probably around the time that the Samya debate was probably happening. Like when Buddhism was traveling from India to Tibet. I think that this is the time that Shantideva was living.
갑자기 메두 샘바세부 코피를 땡고 좀 알았어요.
So at that point in time, Geshe reckons that people's mind was clear, and probably they had no need to rely on coffee.
그래서 드디어자 가정아주 참디. 니바 생기 투 동ар 시옹어 와라 시세티. 다 생기 투 동앙어 와라 시. 찬 돌지기 또기 동앙어와 제리시기. 아니 독지기 또기 동ar 시옹어와 잠비야. 데니 더 니비세 게 사이님보 저번남스 남기님보 장바 꼰도 상보 딘디기 아니 투지기 또기 다 동앙어와 송거서리
가상학소 연디 이게 장식이 루토라 도바치 됐어. 단도 채나 저는
디사지 찍어온
So then, as we're going to pick up on the point that we left off yesterday, we're looking at dedicating so that the suffering of the lower realms may be pacified. We've covered the first point in pacifying the hell realms suffering. Today we're going to pick up from point B, which is dedicating so that it may be pacified through the force of others. So there are 4 main points to this section: pacifying suffering through the force of Vajrapani, pacifying suffering through the compassion of Avalok Dashvarah, pacifying suffering through the force of Manjushri's miraculous display, and aspiration for pacification through the capacity of other closed sons. So there were those closed bodhisattvas, 8 closed bodhisattvas that were considered to be close to the Buddha. Of them, as it says here, we have Kshitigarbha, Kashagarbha, Maitreya, also Savanivarana, Bishkambin, and so forth. Geshe also mentioned Samantabhadra. So actually we have the group of 8, so Vajrapani, Avalokiteshvara, Manjushri, Kshitigarbha, Kashabhava, Maitreya, Savanivarana, Bishkambin, and Samantabhadra.
아니 저 가서
Dila 이게 란칭이 뮤디 귤라 니 샤기라와 디 사메길 사메길레 아니 마리파 파저기 사덴 샤기라와 그래서 사메길레스야 디 카두 사기레스 카두 키그레스 통란 연천에 키그레베 사기레베 스크레치나스
다들 장부시아봤는데 니 대세지 진연 세우치 공치 sivu sejanchi mejurochra tapiki samegile chedan do ne mado do kalamado ani tindigi dan do kalni shebi ta yigiran shin luti dindijre dosra in the samegile di kab dudu sagre seji sivus kiyo mares inaya yigiran shin luti ani pena ringi chanju sembain baina ani tonnom tobada tombani ngosum tobana ani luti dungagi luti jadar yechene ani luti ani yilugi ngole kyodre chik songuyores doinala tinza dindrig luti da ani kalden chongres la zu ani samigi leda ani Mari Pacha Isa, the Samegile, and the digital then the chores, Sonyores.
And it's some mebase the Mare Pakunelani, Maimbache, Tony Topil, Low Kunelani.
Oh, the digital was rather, just a Tombani Tunlaya, some down the and the Sameg lessing the Sagmento Samson. Then he did some goes.
Before we continue with this 4-point outline, yesterday Geshe mentioned mental body, a body in the nature of mind in relation to pacifying the suffering of the hell realms and so forth. So one of the issues or questions that came up in discussing this point was the two causes for accomplishing a body in the nature of mind, a mental body. The two causes are stated to be uncontaminated karma and the grounds of the imprints of ignorance. So the question was, at which point, from which point do you accumulate uncontaminated karma? Now, Geshe said that he has looked into that before, and the texts are not very clear with respect to the beginning point of accumulating uncontaminated karma. One thing that is clear is that once Bodhisattvas who are definite in their lineage attain the path of seeing, from that point onward, the aggregate, which is the aggregate, this is to say that the body, which is the body of sufferings, nature changes. So it says that it's like, it's disappearing like a rainbow in the sky, right? So it is vanishing, and instead the Bodhisattva attains a mental body. So the two causes for that mental body are uncontaminated actions, so uncontaminated karma, and the grounds of the imprints of ignorance. So then the question is, what are uncontaminated actions? What is uncontaminated karma? Well, contaminated actions are motivated by ignorance, whereas it seems that Geshe says that it seems that then uncontaminated actions or karma would be motivated by a reflection upon emptiness. But then still, at which point do you start to accumulate uncontaminated karma? It is not very clear in the text. So this presentation of a mental body, a body in the nature of mind, is based on the Mahayana Sutra tradition.
Odire dinza ta pigi sameg le singdi zu Tombani tenlaya ta yichu zamki ani koni bikap ra ani tusum ju bikalaya ani sameg le di sagores the dilagosres samegle kab to this sagres the d and the d and the tombani pigi chimachin to matu cup ngosum to pashane chimachin a matu kablaya ti zu call tengorslandi the maripacha is sada maripacha is sale tensedi dindistan maripacha is sada pigita denzi shabi ani namanta pacha niga jejig ani nebashuk chembu yebi kabtelaya the lo dripchine tomani tongmatu bi kablaya and that tunju koni bi kabdi to the legras ro ten said and anzo namji leg kulong laya pena Gavachibala Kulon Corse, Tinti, Kulon Chizudi Samaris, Maribaja Salten said. The Dindil Denny and Tomani Tala Jusang and the sound down Tusung Jubicalia and any Sami Casa, Yiranjing Lu Leagi, Gudi, come to do Sagores. That Dini Tomani Pigi, and Semi Nibani Lotta, Ra Pena, Je Tomani maybe Pena Sheneda, and Langdon Sobo Gombi Kalaya, the and Tender Sami Gilelia. Certain Chine, Tomani Wonson Tondi, and Lady Yons Mine, and Lu Yiranjing Lu Langris, Lago Peshiasares.
Since it is not very clear in scripture how, at which point do we accumulate uncontaminated karma, Geshe reckons that when you generate an understanding of emptiness at the level of just correct assumption, from this point onward, when your virtuous actions are motivated by this correct assumption, which is a mere understanding of emptiness, which means that you haven't realized it yet. You haven't realized it with valid cognition yet, but still you have correct assumption with respect to emptiness. From this point onwards, you can start to accumulate uncontaminated action. So we said that for attaining a body in the nature of mind and mental body, there are two main causes: uncontaminated karma and the grounds of the imprints of ignorance. So the imprints of ignorance are imprints of grasping a true existence. Not only the conceptions of the grasping a true existence or the conceptions of true existence, but also the appearances of true existence that they generate. So when you create those uncontaminated actions on the basis of the grounds of the imprints of ignorance, it's not necessarily that what you do is strongly motivated by the grasping. It's not that what you do is strongly motivated by grasping a true existence and the appearances of true existence. You are accumulating such actions motivated by a reflection of emptiness at the level of correct assumption. So it means that, let alone not having attained a perceptual realization of emptiness and not having generated a conceptual realization of emptiness, an inference of emptiness, you're creating them on the basis of correct assumption. Then, which means that at that point, you're accumulating uncontaminated karma. Now, later on, when you progress along the steps of the path, you generate shamatha, calm abiding, and then special insight, vipassana, which are focused on emptiness. And through the force of the combination of shamatha and vipassana, at some point, those uncontaminated karma or actions that you have accumulated are activated. And when you attain the path of seeing with a perceptual realization of emptiness, then these two together, uncontaminated actions and the grounds of the imprints of ignorance, act as causes for the mental body that such bodhisattvas take.
Terda di sondan jigres ra inaya di zo ta anin doshoni yigiran sing lu songu yores an dindij songu do ta di pigi ge ani pa sewu shuchik ra di ta yoda yigiro inaya nginje ma sons di ra ta dini ta nga chose namandu ani gyawdoji changita gyug nanglo la ya teni song di ta gyulu se di sungoras ra ta gyulu di pena ta sound di za gyula soban tani sewu shuchik ra ani gyumulu lendang di ta gyulu sila war di ko pi peg ton min ta dan chi re ma do teng ngoma la ya ta yigiran sing lu one di chagores ra pi longsam ani ngon chi bi ge ani di ge shechene kanji di ni tsu sharvigita shila namba chingi luti ngoni gita i on samda ani ngon yeme 디기 란신 다디 차고레스 다디 아니 나가려야 다 시우슈 송여레스라
This is one explanation. Now, this explanation is based on the sutra tradition as for the way that you rise into the mental body and nature of mind. But it seems that the explanation that we find in the sutra tradition is not very detailed, or at least Geshe hasn't seen an explanation that is so detailed with respect to how you attain the body and nature of mind. It's not to say that that explanation does not exist. It's just that Geshe hasn't seen a very clear explanation of the way that a body and nature of mind is attained. But then when you look at the tantras as taught by Buddha Vajradhara, the victor Vajradhara, such as, for example, in the root tantra of Guhya Samaja, there is a clear explanation of how one arises into what is called an illusory body. Now, the term illusory body is used because it has a certain significance. It uses an analogy, an illusion, in order to explain this body. But then the meaning of this body is exactly like the meaning of a body in the nature of mind, a mental body. But it's just that what you find in the tantras is clearer than what you find in the sutras. So when you look at the explanation that is found in such tantras, the root tantra of Guhya Samaja, then we have, first of all, a mind that comes together with wind. They're a single entity. They're indivisible in being a single entity. And with the wind that acts as a mount for mind, they rise into a form of a deity with arms and legs and so forth. So then here, from the point of view of mantra, or from the point of view of tantra, it is very clear then how one develops that union of body and mind, in which the mind and the wind that acts as a mount for that mind arise into a certain form of having arms and legs and so forth. So we call it in the tantric tradition an illusory body, but really the meaning is a body in the nature of mind.
레디칼라야 디기 아니 이기란식 류디 선남도 다 규미 류기 아니 피 냐렌 쪼라야 아니 사메길레 세드 숭구요 마레스 라디기 피 쪼디 다 뉴만 렌치 기비기 셈 세다 디 샴바 기비 다 심도 트비 론님보디 에기 피 시치니 용구요레스 찌다니다 노율려야 가상각 아니 피기다 다두 아니 피 또온디 콘데 탐지기 싸워칭인디 아니 뉴멀렌지 기비 샘테다 디 숑버 기비 아니 롱라야 샤니 아니 디 톤츠 참마 아니 용고야식 샤르고야식 송고도스라.
From the point of view of the main explanation as found in the sutra system, when we look at the causes for a body in the nature of mind, it is said that uncontaminated actions act as a substantial cause, and the grounds of the imprints of ignorance act as a cooperative condition. Then when you look at that from the point of view of Hayasuga Tantra, on how one arises into the illusory body, then we have a combination of mind and wind. Particularly when we look at the most extremely subtle mind and wind, we have the fundamental mind and its mount, the fundamental wind. The fundamental wind acts as a substantial cause for the illusory body, and the fundamental mind acts as the cooperative condition for that. And this combination of the extremely subtle wind and mind, the fundamental wind and mind, is said to be the root of samsara and nirvana.
마레와스 다 제바스라디 피기 또 차비까블야 이주 세디 마도 공기 피 까블들야 자고라스라.
So Oli is asking from home, is inferential cognition same as correct assumption? So that they're not the same. Inferential cognition is a realizing consciousness, and a correct assumption is a consciousness that is correctly assuming or determining a certain point. But it hasn't reached a realization yet.
Yikchus laundi re ta yikchus laundi pe manzu yikchu magi kong ani tezom segri ngores tezom le nishane tengyur da tenmengyur ki ani tenmengyur ki tezom yina mena pechi insari nyambi kala ya tengyur ki tezom ki ani dene tachik du resha nyambi lo kiwi kala ya yikchu segores ro dene tachik du yimba di ngeba nibi kala ya 아니 더 제바키 고레스로 제바키 고라스로
What precedes a correct assumption is a doubting consciousness. So doubting consciousness asking, is it like this or is it not like this? Then we have a correct assumption, which is still hasn't reached a certain degree of certainty. So you can say that, you know, in some sense, there's still a certain doubt that is there because a conclusive resolution hasn't been reached. But once a conviction has been reached, in a sense that once you have ascertained it and you have full confidence in that, then a realization is reached. So this is what we call an inferential cognition.
단단한 로산다 다 차나 도지 또기 동을 시험해 봤니스 지시는 신지 메다 카당 저그 메세 남자치 군nemse 내가 기비 투산되고 수윤 투념대 캔도 때는 남기 때는 차는 도진 바와 슌동네 rabdu gavi shugi digdan trene tedanenjik trobershos.
So we're continuing with the reading of the text. So the first point in dedicating to that may be pacified through the force of others is pacifying suffering through the force of Vajrapani in verse 11. It reads, wondering why the henchmen of Yama and the terrible ravens and vultures afraid, whose strength is the fine strength that utterly dispels darkness and generates happiness and joy. Upon looking upwards, they behold Vajrapani abiding blazing in the midst of space. By the force of their strong joy, may they be freed from negativities and be in his company.
Never nebi sumjanam lord dungarda tana. Gisheres, Yavi Nintendo, Dalan never chibi, Shinji Meta, Kada Chagu Meseba Nam Chagbar Chijin, Kunim Mumbatamje Selni, Lu Devata Yi Gawakibi, Tusambon, Diku, Suyun Tunyam Des, Suyun Tunyam Des, Namka Kendu Debena, Namki Tina Chana Dorjig, Bawa Shuban Tony, Gombotella, Jab Sondi. Rabdu Gavi Shugi, Hunsabi, Diva the Tani, Ted and Hinji Jobber shows.
Looking at the commentary to this verse, it says, when the sentient beings of the hell realms are temporarily freed from their suffering, they think, why am I afraid of the men, crows and vultures of the Lord of Death, those killers of men? Who is this this wholesome power that creates physical bliss and mental happiness, dispelling all darkness completely? May they look up into the sky and see Vajrapani blazing with splendor in the center of the sky. May they take refuge in this protector, and the power of their extreme joy free them from their previously accumulated negativities, and may they then accompany him.
Tirtachadangi Nyawala Kitsavichela, Ani Lord Dungar the Churchini, Pigi Ludevadan Sam Gawaki, Ani Tusambudi, Sulayoris Laundi, Ani P Nyawal Nebi Sumjanamki, Ani P Namkalaya Tibitsi, Ani Namki Kina Chana Dorji, Wembawa Shuban Tony, and Telaya Jabsondi. Tening Hunsak Digbatar Royal Sawa. That and is shows and that Malam Jaguaris or Dindis Sungudo as there are.
So what Shantideva says here with respect to those sentient beings, again, finding themselves in the hell realms, is that they're temporarily freed from physical and mental pain when, and this is just a temporary occurrence, when they behold Vajrapani, as it says here, may they look up into the sky and see Vajrapani blazing with splendor in the center of the sky.
데르다 디 차나 도지 돕기 동ар 시오세 다 차나 도지 돕기 제단 차나 도지기 겨 차나 도지기다 아니 투톱기 아니 도무투야다 셈무투야기 아니 동아치 자원인다 요 말레스 다 메나야 랑기 동아디 차나 도지기 느덥기 세바체발야 아니 소수 응원에 비기 몰롬다 바차다 안 딘디기 겐지 메나 아니 차나 도지 바시 응원에 동아세야세디 다 용고 말아왔어 산점된 되겠다 소원하신다 용고 말아왔어 딘상 안수기 단단히 빼나 지 아니 샘딘이 지 몰롬 슈다기야로 소바 로 샘딘이 비기다 지 챌린지야로 소바 디 아니 제바나 디기 바샤디 아니 샘딩라야 고 투부신 샤위 온디 아니 깝깔라야 레 셴비기 톱기 냐왈 기바이나야 아니 수수 샘딩라야 게비 바샤 야부 샤연자 안 디당 차나 도지기 니바니기 아니 니바 튀니부도 dom체니 냐왈 기나야 아니 비기 테마타도 트르체니 아니 루다 이 가와키친 간지 아니 단데 dimmalom kya manashinji 아니 고고용 초고서레스
Although in general we can say that there is no physical pain and mental suffering that can withstand the might of Vajrapani, still being kind of our own suffering or sentient being suffering, if they find themselves in miserable states of existence or in hellish states of existence, the suffering can be temporarily put on hold if they have accumulated the imprints, if they have done aspirations before. So although here we do say that by the might of Vajrapani, nothing can withstand, no physical and mental suffering can withstand the might of Vajrapani, still, even if a Buddha is very strong, very powerful, without sentient beings creating the causes for being protected from suffering, physical and mental, then even the might of Vajrapani will not be able to assist them. So, for example, when we think of our case, suppose that we, in this life, create actions with respect to Vajrapani in our aspirational prayers and so forth. We place those really substantial imprints, strong imprints upon the mind stream. And because of a combination of other karmas, we end up in a miserable state of existence, a hellish state of existence in our next lifetime. Still, by the force of having created those strong imprints in this life, we can reach this. Geshe reckons that there are situations in which someone can reach a temporary reprieve from physical and mental pain in those states of existence due to having made prayers before or having created strong imprints upon their mind stream.
데레시 된자 간징 안주기 남기 지 생아사야리 아니 물론게야리 어두수 참을로 개첨부 쇼지 차가 여바디 안 두솔라 때니 다 하고고여서 당아 딜로 상고도 스라 다 딘디기 파차직 매바이나 차나 돌질야 투다 니바 가리 여바이나야 투다 니바 가리 여바이나야 응주 동아리 트라야디 카부 쇼지 좀 된데 송요라서라 로동아 차금에서 니지 또버셴라 펴면 춘이 댐버때는 졸고를 송대야지 간지 아니 소수 응원에 비기기 지 구규지 야마투바나 아니 차나 도질야 가르모 가리 여바이나야 카부슈 소수 응원에 지 디송요라 산기기 아니 작규디 가와라 거는야 아니 키마투게 제요 말데냐 건사가 완론도 메나 베나간주 볼 드라우지 바이나 아니 작규 가르 여바이나야 볼 디작규 간엔 토시그 마르스 딘자 대범 게비 사병기 안온치 소수기 샘딘라 메나 아니 상기 작규 그냥 가보시오지레스 딘자 디체도 아니 게비 파샤 샤야디 가리나야 로 몰람게야 베나 탱아드라야 또 사마 로게 간지 상기 찬섬기 고순투기 연된 템비토니 아니 릉아 이섬기 자와 가르쳐 봐야나야 디기 샘딜라야 게비 파샤 샤고레스라.
So then in our recitation, we might recite different mantras. With the prayers that we make, we create those important imprints in our mind. So it's important to still continue with our recitation. It's still continue to do our prayers, because without creating those imprints upon a mind stream, it might be that the ability and the power of Vajrapani would be enormous, but still without ourselves creating the ability for being helped by Vajrapani, we're not going to be able to be helped by him. So it is said that in one of the verses of teachings of the Buddha, water cannot wash away your negativities. I cannot reach out and remove your own suffering. I cannot transfer my realization from my mind stream to your mind stream. The only way that I can liberate you is teaching you the truth of reality. So it is said also in scripture that the Buddha's activities are like this iron hook. So there's nothing that this iron hook cannot pick up, but it needs to have something to latch upon. It needs to have a ring to hook onto, in a sense that even if you have this really strong iron hook of the enlightened activities of the Buddha, still if they try to hook into a bowl which has nothing that you can use in order to hook it up, you'll not be able to pick up this bowl. So similarly, from our perspective, we can say that although the Buddha's enlightened activities are very powerful, they have great potential, if we from our own side do not create the cause and conditions for being helped by the actions of the Buddha, we will not be helped by them, regardless of how powerful the Buddha is, like, for example, Buddha Vajrapani. And therefore, it is important to create roots of virtue. It is important to create them through the prayers that we make and through the imprints that we place upon a mind stream, because through that we create those avenues in which we'd be able to engage with those enlightened activities.
Radandi courage ganan diwajita nyawar nibi samjana lower the donga the trana jisher nyawin nende dal neba jibi shenjimada tindigi ani gawajibi tudi sui nyamdi kendu teba naslawandi nyawarang ya jargoras tindigi samlo kia de ya hung gewe bachaj mena ani nyawi tenla ya samlo di kitu marwas hung gewe bacha yobaina ani sanji ani chansamgi ani chili topgi tende ani lodi ki tuguyores ra pena nyawi tenla ya pena chanju semki atindi yos tindi anjin son yores tenza gewe lo ani chi dindi gita nga dongal sivi neba de sulayo na nyamne en pe ani ka kendu lobas namkal desenanda ani chi ma nyewa dang ya dendros lavra ani gewi cholaya kendu sedi gewi cholaya ani samlo tang slavna digdos gewi cholaya samlo tangdi ani namki kina changna dojin baba shu tong sedi namka di manzu namgyugi ani namka mashaba ani bigige namgyu ani tombani yu tinni madrubigi ani tongsan zamti ani yul di chebigi ani titobigi ani lo nimbo ani ngon yeme de soma tongsan di ngon tsu 아니 산지 찬성 탐지 동산 디 문수 아니 다 총군도 왔어. 샤기도 왔어. 딘디지 아니 제기 다 차나도지 투도기 용거레스. 딘 지비깔이야 아니 샘페 아니 가서 타치도 비기래야 아니 겹손체 아니 랑기 혼사기 다 점루 디토기 아니 혼사기 데바 탐지다 타니 겨도지 찬다 헨치도 trouble 용초고레스.
So then it says, when the sentient beings of the hell realms are temporarily freed from their suffering, they think, why am I afraid of the men, crows, and vultures of the Lord of Death, those killers of men? So here it refers to sentient beings of the hell realms. So it is said that actually those who are caught in miserable states of existence, such as the hells, even in the hells, there are those that can give rise to bodhicitta, the man of enlightenment. So it is possible for some beings to generate bodhicitta, even if they are caught in such miserable states of existence. That, of course, needs to be those that have made those aspirational prayers before, those that have created roots of virtues for that before. So if someone has not created roots of virtues before, if they have not made aspirational prayers before, they will not have the opportunity of generating bodhicitta, the man of enlightenment, in the hells and so forth. But those that have done that before, if they created those strong imprints, there are opportunities for them to do that, even if they find themselves in miserable states of existence. So it says, when the sentient beings of the hell realms, which means those particular sentient beings who have created those roots of virtues that have made aspirations before, are temporarily freed from the suffering, they think, why am I afraid of men, crows, and vultures of the Lord of Death, those killers of men, who is this wholesome power that creates physical bliss and mental happiness, dispelling all darkness completely. May they look up into the sky and see Vajrapani blazing with splendor in the center of the sky. Now, the word sky is the same as the word for space. So here we can say that in general, you can generate roots of virtue, either by looking down at those that are caught up in miserable states of existence, or looking up at the pleasant state of existence. Here it says that may they look up into the sky and see the powerful Vajrapani. Now, the sky or space is a word that we use in Buddhist philosophy, which also is connected with emptiness. So in relation to a particular object, on the basis of a particular object, you understand its absence of inherent establishment, right? So it is not established, does not exist objectively. And then you have the mind that is indivisible from the realization of its absence of inherent establishment. So from within the sphere, or the space of realizing the object's emptiness, you can then see Vajrapani. This is what this section is saying, right? So may they look up into the sky. What you wish for sentient beings is to form the sphere of emptiness, the realization of emptiness, in which the mind and emptiness, the absence of inherent establishment, are indivisible. May they see Vajrapani blazing with splendor in the center of that space. May they take refuge in this protector and the power of the extreme joy, right? So through that, they generate the power of extreme joy, and may that free them from the previous accumulated negativities, and may they then accompany him.
Teresa pena dion chogores nganzu shijag ka kepsalaya ane sangi gi tuk kyabiyores sangi gi tuk ka kepsalaya sangi gi kui kyabiyoba ra dinza sosu kaso tachi dangnan dang ane tindi gi chogbayina ane kaddu yinaya kawala yinaya 아니 산진 아니 제여바치 연구여 살아왔으라 배나 소주게 아니 레다 뭐노 박차 사mol을 써봐 이 피기 용수 참바이나 가정이만 아주 쉬대 존시 롱고 거를 때니 아니 상기게 배는 뒤지면 답을 땜비게 아니 송양제 고쳐고도 왔으라 고쳐고도 왔어.
After all, we said that the Buddha's mind pervades all objects of knowledge. So wherever you are, you find phenomena, there you will also find a Buddha's mind. And wherever you find a Buddha's mind, there will also be a body of Buddha. So when you think about it like that and you train yourself in developing pure appearances, wherever you are, you'll be able to see Buddhas. So that depends upon your accumulated karma, the aspirational prayers that you make, the imprints of virtue that you place upon your mind stream. It depends upon that when you practice in developing pure appearance, wherever you are, you can come in contact with Buddhas. Just like we said previously a few days ago, that when you reach a certain point of development, even the movement of wind through the trees for you can be teachings on impermanence. It can teach you impermanence.
제가 배나 파박군도 상부주비고 분놈 코로나로야 촉주 뒤숨기 상기 탐제라 창사고 세지 윤거라서라 촉주 뒤숨려야 슈비기 상기 매나 딘디기 차세세디 용마라서라 딘자 소수기 대비 쪽바이나 아니 상기 슈 메시지 상기 메시지 싸워니니 다 미스버레도 왔으라 딘자 소수 카와 되나야 안 다가는 초주 자와세다 제바 다가랑이야 야시 야탄바다 요리스라 딘자 딘디지기 아니 이체당 대바지기 토네 아니 뭐놈지 잡아이나 아니 콜 켄신 레싱 급도기 녀발 잡아이나야 아니 녀비 땐라야 녀비 동안 뇽히라야 아니 홍기 레다 뭐놈 급도기 아니 게비 로키야 아니 텔레데니 비기 초주 자와세다 제바 비기 차나도 지고 많이 봐 초주 자와세다 제바 아니 제토야 딘디 야시야다면 연구여서라 왔으라
In Samattabhadra's King of Prayer, at the beginning, there is a making of offerings to all the Buddhas of the 3 times in the 10 directions, right? So the Buddhas of the 10 directions of the 3 times, to all of them, I make prostrations, I pay homage. So without Buddhas existing in the 10 directions in the 3 times, the act of, if they're absent from the 10 directions or from the 3 times, the act of paying homage to them will become meaningless. But with trust and faith that we develop in a mind stream, it is impossible for a certain place to be without Buddhas. It is impossible for Buddhas to be absent from a certain location. They're definitely there. And therefore, making aspirational prayers motivated by trust, motivated by faith, even if we end up in miserable states of existence, such as the hells, we can still give rise to virtuous state of mind through the force of having made aspirational prayers. So that depends upon, and through that we can not only come to see Vajrapani, but also all other Buddhas.
데레다 안간주다 라 등간 베나 안주 파바 토메기 라 지주 참바 주비다 남터 조라스 딘디 톨치 사운드단다 베 얌sem으로치 나는 건조 니짜도 켄명알디 베 팽그도스로 파바 토메기 아니 지주 참바 공부 드브신데 로쭉이 릴라야 비기 다치 초사 드브잔 난치 아니 드브컬야 켄 제마투체 아니 타마 다 의로지 투체 아마 칠로 되는 다지 람친지라마 아니 페브드르 갑들이야 되니 키 하장이 냠타바 아니 주부체가 마차 부스딩이 뭐 덴디지 통진이 데 시벌 때니 다지 년지 슈체모 슈치 총체 아니 키데 피길이야 다 아니 로버체 원드르 갑들라 되니 시니 피기 키 마임바 아니 주전 자만 공부디 아니 갑두딘 제레스 다디 균생 카르레스 라운디 디 녜라야 로충니 진라야 드르는 만지야 갑두딘 제야디 카르레스 라운디 소삭 만단 드르중 만단니 제마투 거레스 다 닌지 슈치부 디 톱지 아니 속 조바인자 아니 지도 잠만 공부 샤르몬슨 시바레스 디디 송고도스 야지야 나 야지 야다면 hinjir sam고도스라 만주기 소수기 쏘는 거 맞잖아 소사기 만다나 산지 찬섬 제투고 말was 딘지기 쏘는 여바이나 아니 내가 뒤율 가발레 바이나야 산지 찬섬 제야치 용구여서레스
And the same sentiment is found in the account of the encounter between Arya Sangha and Maitreya. Geshe finds at least this story, the account of the meeting between a Sangha and Maitreya, to be really helpful. So, and he said that Arya Sangha has practiced for 12 years in trying to see the Venerable Maitreya, to encounter Venerable Maitreya. And although for 12 years he was accumulating the collections and purifying negativities and obscurations, still he was not able to see Maitreya face to face. At some point, he said that as he left his place of practice and he was walking along the road, he came across a sick dog that was in a really poor condition. Half of his body was infected with maggots. And when he was motivated with great compassion, thinking of the way that he could be of help to that poor and sick dog, through the power of his compassion, he was able to complete the accumulations that were necessary and to purify negativities and obscuration, to the point in which he was finally able to meet Maitreya face to face. So before completing the accumulation, before purifying negativities and obscurations, what appeared to his mind was an infested dog, a sick dog. Whereas having completed the accumulations, having purified negativities and obscurations, he came to see Maitreya face to face. So that story, Geshe reckons, what it tells us, or what it indicates to us, is that without completing the accumulations, without enough purification, we're not going to be able to see Buddhas and Bodhisattvas face to face. Whereas if we do complete our accumulations and purify enough, we will be able to see Buddhas and Bodhisattvas face to face.
데르다 파바토메기 주준 잠봉고 몽고스 집에 갑들라다 아니 파바 가서 파바토메다 슈 집에다 아니 가체 다 간지 아니 겐다 게투 투바타우 체치네 데네베 아니 게 로중니릴야 캐란지에 치도 깔레자위 제투 마손도 딘디기 따지 가서다 아 교난로지 야 슈르스 어디 송고도스 디슈 카들야 주든 잠mon곰베 아니 캐랑가 아니 만통와레 마도 나 캐랑 틀 여여바인스 나 캐랑 틀 여여바인스 이 마치는 캐랑 비글레 데니 캐랑기 칼 아니 치마마 술 유온디기 아니 닌디가나 사스스 랍지 아니 남사가라야 파바토메 비글레야 두칸나 슈데디 아니 치마 유샤주디 주든 잠mon곰베 남사가라 여바티 땡르세 딘디 아하
When Arya Sangha came to see Maitreya face to face, he was so full of joy, like a meeting of a student and a teacher. But still, he was trying to do that for 12 years. So in his heart, there was also some sadness of having gone for such a long time without having been able to meet Maitreya. And Maitreya told him that he was always there by his side, but because of his lack of accumulation and not having purified enough, a Sangha was not able to see him. Geshe's teacher told him the story, and he said that even there was one time in which Maitreya was meditating in his cave, and Maitreya was there. Now he was spitting to the side where to the side where they were sitting in the cave, and his spit landed in the lap of Maitreya, and yet he wasn't able to see that.
Tsultrim 아니 간지 난주지 산제 창섬 가와이나 shuyor de ya je manju sadi chenlam ju manju sadi rangi sosa dribjanda ji mulum tuma mebala soba an dinti la ya ani tuyo ba inza ta kanji sozungani ta chegoe ditsu pe mazwa kichimu isares ro mulum jaya dozo.
And therefore, though Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are there wherever you are, if you can't see them, if you don't engage your blessings, it means that you haven't accumulated enough, you haven't purified enough. And it's important to do that, and also to accumulate merit, to accumulate the collections, to purify negativities and obscurations, and to make stainless aspirational prayers. It's important to do that, and we can do that.
Tereda dinza bena jasachim shawalegi chonju di sombe kabdola ya ani mulamo hovi level chik surdun zegoya di kechimbu shuch mena di song marwas ra.
So Shantideva composed his Guide to Bodhisattva Way of Life, and if dedications were not that important, he would not have composed a chapter on dedication.
Re dirda dinda niba cherisi tuji shiwa membernes the khon du chana dorji tukje said so di pigi tanganzu thadro tukba na chana dorji said the sangi karsota tobom nuba dindichila ya ro nuba dindich the dig zawan thadu shiawandi ani tabdan sherevni ani son du devi ani the nubajgi oras ro nuba di sul ha sharjawadi ani chana dorji sing dindichik toni ani ku shangi yosare mada jamba kan yosamares dini niba cherisi ra ninji ranzu has songodos ninji ranzu tagara ninji ra sanji chansam gu tugyu gi ninji chambu tsu ani la sha jawa delaya ani cherisi an tanda nganzu mi number chendeva delaya ani jawa töngi dabu di suzu mebe chona di chago ras ra dinji chin rogo wasres.
So we've covered verse 11, pacifying suffering through the force of Vajrapani. Next is pacifying suffering through the compassion of Avalok Dashvarah. Now, Vajrapani is regarded as the embodiment of the ability of the Buddhas. Now, the abilities of the Buddhas is attributed to the integration between method and wisdom. Having united method and wisdom, Buddhas are capable of working for the sake of others. So Vajrapani embodies that capability. Then we have Avalokiteshvara, who is the embodiment of the compassion or compassionate love in the minds of Buddhas of 10 directions. So then, thinking of those beings that embody those qualities of the Buddha, they embodies those qualities for our sake, which means that if you think of a certain quality of Buddha, that can be embodied.
Dinza penanganzugi suzugi ni chona chana doji kumbongondo cheyore pabacheriz kumbongondo cheyores kansana suzugi semnalo ya tabshi son devi toni nyamlen chebayna ani suzu semdi igi digi nuba semdi la ya drup ninjigi toba dia suzu semgyola ya chong di tobi ani suzu semdon tsu ani chana doji kush and dre yore power genesis ku dre yore juzun jambi ku dre yore dinza di ngong la ya suzu di ngong la ya ani kompang on the chair yoba de tagaran redo asra.
So if we develop a mind in those particular ways, a mind can also, we can also embody the qualities that those beings embody. So we have here, for example, Vajrapani and Avalokiteshvara and Manjushri and so forth. So if we develop compassion in our mind, at some point when our compassion becomes so strong, then we on that basis can also come to embody the compassion of all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, which means that we can embody Avalok Dashvarah. If we develop the ability or wisdom and so forth, when they become very strong and forceful, we can also in the future come to embody those qualities like Vajrapani, like Manjushri, and so forth. We have the ability to do so.
타 제네스 유튜브지 쇼메바니스 메도차바 부지 단진 베바이 냐위 메다 친질 서번 통결니 로울 데비 선반 디치 sambatang semnyen namji changde bemun tongor shos.
Let's look at verse 12. It says, having seen the fire of the hells splattered and extinguished by a falling rain of flowers mixed with scented water, immediately satiated with bliss and wondering what has caused this, may the hellwinds up behold Padmapani.
데리다 늦직버리다 셴야 메도기 잡아 부추단 제번 바바이 냐위 메다 친절 수업은 통 견네스 다자 로르드 데벳 선반디 규치 냠도 삼니 데바타 심제냐와 남지 차나 빼만 한비 제리스 통쇼스.
Now the commentary is similar to that. It says, further, having seen the fires of hell extinguished by a splattering rain of flowers mixed with scented water, the hellbeings wonder what the cause was for this temporary satisfaction of happiness. When they look around, they may see Chenrezig, who holds a lotus flower in his hands.
단 잠비안기 춘출 시험해봤어. 데리다 지존 잠비안 세대 단 지버치기 지존 잠비안티 아니 산지 조지자와 세대 집이 두규기 아니 셰럽디 아니 술 하이 넘버 샤바텔이야 아니 지존 잠비안 송고레스라.
And then the next section is pacifying suffering through the force of Manjushri's miraculous display, through the emanations of Manjushri. So just like we said before, Manjushri is regarded as the embodiment of the wisdom of all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, appearing in the form of Manjushri.
때 남진 지존 잠비안라야 가우kalaya 시럽 지존 잠비안 시럽을 하리 소인데. 라 파바 아니 젠리스 닌지를 하리 소인데 닌지술 하샤바 셰럽술 하샤비 차니 아니 셰럽글라데 닌지글 하 송고르다 라 간주 남기 꼰다도지긴 바이나야 비 셀리 쇠비 꼬지나 셀쿠 세기도 하서라 싱리 쇠비 꼰다지나 싱쿠 세기도 담발 쇠비 꼰다는 담쿠 세기도 하서라 데드 지버지냐 셰럽기 셰럽술 하샤비 차니 아니 셰럽 클라세 고레스 덴즈 소수기 소소라야 비 아니 셰럽디 kieg niba di nganzu something la ya rig di yores is a ani dida ani big mi leba nimbu di table tene ani nam ju sal de tene drawa ina ani sharab di konne konde perchini tar ani jejun jambi yangi kur kiro yoba di tesum tsawani ta sagog mares.
Manjushri is regarded as the embodiment of wisdom, and also Avalokiteshvara or Chenrezig is regarded as the embodiment of compassion, which means that in some sense we can say that there is a particular substance or ingredient like compassion or wisdom from which those beings are made. It's just like saying that you have statues made of gold and then you call that statue a golden statue. You have one that is made of wood and you call that a wooden statue. You make one out of clay and you call that a clay statue. So similarly, when we then think of these beings, Manjushri, Avalokiteshvara, and so forth, the first is the embodiment of wisdom, right? Made of, you can say, wisdom. The second is of compassion, and we have the ability to develop them. Like, for example, we have the ability to develop wisdom because we have the lineage. This is to say, because we have the potential for developing that. So if we put enough effort into the development of wisdom, there's no doubt that in the future we can come to embody the aspect of wisdom. In the future, we can transform into Manjushri.
대대자변의 지준 잠비양 그 생활교육 소바 지준 잠비양이야 소바다 지준 잠비양 그 비다지 년바당양 소바 체냐 아니 셔럽 폐기를 다가랑 로스로 셔럽을 가지고 땜바 뒤쪽이 셔럽 폐기를 왔다 로 닌지라야 가지고 비게 르데체네 닌지라야 삼다 니부체와나 랑기 줄이야 닌지 공부를 적으러 왔어 그래서 닌지 공 공부 타투바 아니 사샤자비기 빼나 아니 파바체리스라야 아니 로니 텐섬 때바이나 랑기 주지 닌지 공부를 적으러 왔어 아니 지준 잠비야 셔럽 라이라야 아니 자자 자담바 르데 이치 체네 아니 소바타나 랑기 주지 셔럽 폐기세디 콜 균센도스 라 균센도스
So if we recite the mantra of Manjushri, we supplicate that in a practice, and we apply this practice to our mind, we can develop our wisdom. We can increase our wisdom. And we do need to develop our wisdom. We do need to increase it. And the same thing can also be said with respect to relying upon Chenrezig, Avalok, Dashvarah, in order to increase our compassion. So if we rely upon Chenrezig, we do the practice, we make supplications, we meditate on compassion and so forth. Certainly, the compassion aspect in a mind stream can be developed to the point in which we can come in the future to embody the compassion aspect.
일단 자위 나물이야 초당 직법 폴라 링와 추쇼 우비 태도네 강긴 투이 동할타 콘트 가위 슉친라 드와콘네 용접 chanju sambo tsewa kekirpa jonu subu chamber jigpa mebar cheba chishikchins.
Verse 13 says, friends discarding fear come from the distance. Why flee when directly in front of us is the one by whose strength we are freed from suffering and the force of joy emerges, the one who thoroughly protects all migrating beings and has generated bodhicitta and mercy. The youthful one with the blazing top knot who removes all fears.
Chok
Chok dagla. Chok dagla.
Chok talarende.
No.
Chok drambanes. Chok tas. Da. Chok dramba. Chok jimba ni ingiri. Chok jimba ni sarsang. Jewa di namali. Chok drang ngabje jesh chabje ki yingti ngabati. Chok dramba slada.
Oh.
Chok jimba ni ingiri. Chok
dramba slada jila chok den de ketan.
Chok da tsusho sedi ketan matra.
No.
Tsusho nyevin jigwa po la rinwa tsusho. Ubi tedu kangin tuyi dung luigi dungal kontrashi semjin jigwa mebar chebe gawi shukjin la drawa kun gyobi wedan tsewi mani kewarin gyoba shonu subujen jizun jambiyan. Wedan barwa tang daja semjin jigwa mebar sushik chimban gyujik pyonen wongwa tang kyoji haji choben tagi shabji bemola choji tukjilinji ula medo tumin soji chari paba kanzi yon hamu tongcha dunyan jogden dutu she jamyan tendan tongni tan semnye chachun denbar shoos.
In explaining that, the commentary says the invitation is made, friends, come here, far away from the dangerous ones of hell. May all go into him, by whose power they shall be free from all sufferings of the body and all mental fears, and thus be enraptured in the power of joy. He who is in the light and loving mother, rescuing all migrators, the youthful one with a radiating crown protrusion, who frees our minds with fear. And we also then continue with verse 14, which says, behold him in an attractive mansion, resounding with the melodious eulogies of thousands of goddesses, with hundreds of gods paying homage at his lotus feet with their crowns and his eyes moist with compassion, a rain of clusters of many flowers falling upon his head. Upon seeing Manjushri in this way, may the hell beings exclaim,
저 달라 취지 하지 주변 다기 섭지 배모라 취지 투질렘비 젠다 대신 올라 메도토미 소지 차를 봐봐 더버드로스 룰람비 한번 동자도 된바 이동위 캄바츠바드 제반데 뜻이 제바다 대단 장야 우지번 톤이 심진여는 가위 콘존 덴버쇼스.
friends, behold the one to whom 100 gods make offerings to his lotus feet with the crowns, who has eyes moist with compassion, on whose crown diverse flowers bouquets are raining down, and who is praised by 100,000s of goddesses from towering buildings with verses and music. May the sentient beings of the hell realms be placed in the laughter of joy upon seeing the melodious one who bestows breath.
Tadini Shiva Nivi Se Shengi Nibi Shiva Meba. The Se Shen Pigita Sai Nyembo Driba Namsel Namki Nyembo Chamba Kundu Sambo. Tesoras Teder Dagi Geze Kundu Sangla So Chanju Samba Driba Metin Devata Silshin Tishim Penden Chava Bentoni. And
then we have verse 15, which makes aspiration for pacification through the capacity of the other closed sons, which means the other bodhisattvas in this group. Kshitigaba, Kashagaba, Maitreya, Sava Nivarana Bishkambini, and Samantabhadra. It says in verse 15, thus, by my roots of virtue, having seen the comfortable, cool, and fragrant rain falling from the unobstructed clouds of bodhisattvas such as Samantabhadra, may the sentient beings of the hell become joyful. Thus, by the roots of my merits, may the unobstructed clouds of the bodhisattvas Samantabhadra, Maitreya, Sai Nimbo, which is Kshitigarbha, Namkanimbo, Akashagarbha, and so forth, those bodhisattvas with powerful prayers, a blissful rain, fresh and fragrant, fall. May the hell beings, upon seeing his rain, be delighted. That's all. Should we leave the text here for now? Gewadi Nyududa Lama Sangye Drugyune Doa Chikyama Lupa Te Salago Parasho Chanchu Samcho Rinpoche Make Panan Ke Gyurchi Gewa Nyamba Me Bayan Kone Kondum Pewarasho Kangri Rawe Kowe Shingamsu Pendan Dewa Malun Jongwe Ne Chenre Siwan Tenzin Gyatsoy Shabe Sindi Bardu Tengyuruji Tony ninja sundu jupe lam
lam
cheche
chejer
seje
sanze
kanchen
kanchen ten
ten
gun chana pe mo ten zen yang zo la so wa de so shen dun dun ru shu
tu su
cham
jan
chen
shin
jang
jang
gun
gun
ya
ya
we
we ten
ten
zin
zen
kyung
kyong
pe
pe we
we kung
gun zo
zo
lo
do
bo
po ze cho
cho
sung
sung
ko
ko
we
we
le
le
mun
mon
tu
du ju
ju pa
pa
da
da
so
so
du
du
je
ji
gong
gong du
du
sha
sha
den
fen
shu